there are plenty of books that feature libraries. Yes, hello and welcome back to the channel. So today a roundup videos that deals with books that feature libraries and feature fictitious, fantastical libraries in some way or form. There are plenty of books that have libraries as their setting or as part of their world building. I picked 10 books that I own in physical form and that I have actually read. So the first one is probably the text that is responsible for a lot of other libraries in other books, and that is Jorge Luis Borges' The Library of Babel. This is a short story from 1941 and has quite an interesting setup. So the library, it imagines, is made up out of hexagonal rooms, which means that each room has 6 walls. One wall contains the door. Another wall has everything that the librarians need to do their work, and then the last 4 walls of each room are filled with bookshelves. And on those bookshelves we find every book that can be produced by permutating a set of 25 characters. And the 25 characters are 22 letters, the colon, the comma, and the blank space. And what this setup will provide is that actually, or at least theoretically, any book that has been written can be in this library, because when the permutation is right, it will of course also produce books that have been written. Furthermore, it can produce books that haven't been written yet. So this library is very much a metaphor for, writing in general, but also meaning. How do we ascribe meaning? The question of, is meaning actually endless? Because the library itself is not endless. Now, at some stage we will have all the possible permutations done, but I mean, of course, it's a gigantic number of possibilities and possible books that we can produce that way. But the meaning ascribed to those books, of course, can be endless. And yes, this is also the book or the text where Gene Wolfe gets this idea for the Book of the New Sun that he uses for the framework, that this is a book that has been translated from a language that's only exists in the future, because this is an idea that Borges develops in this text, that of course the library contains a lot of books that are total gibberish. But he says, well, maybe they're not gibberish. Maybe they are actually written in languages of the future, languages that we haven't heard about yet, that we don't know yet, but that in a future people will be able actually to read, understand, translate into other languages. So this is where Gene Wolfe, who was a big Borges fan, gets this idea from, where he borrows this from. My next example is also from a big Borges fan, and this is Umberto Eco, Il nome della rosa, The Name of the Rose. Now, this isn't a fantasy or sci-fi book. This is a historical novel. And yeah, it kind of like incorporates a lot of things from other books, other traditions. In this case, the crime novel, especially the Sherlock Holmes novels, because we have one protagonist who has the name of William of Baskerville, and then we have Atzo of Melk. Atzo of Melk is our narrator. We meet him first as a very old man, where he narrates the events when he and his teacher William von Baskerville kind of like visit a very remote monastery in the mountains in northern Italy. And this place has been picked because it's used for a get-together and a theological debate, but also some murders start to happen in this monastery. So it's part crime story, but it also has a lot of ideas about, yeah, again, meaning. How do we ascribe meaning? The meaning of, yeah, individual lives as well. And yes, it features a library that's very much modeled on Borges' library. Here the walls are hexagonal of the library, but the library is very labyrinthine, very sprawling. And when William of Baskerville and Atzo of Melk are entering this library to find the answer to those murders, yeah, they discuss some of those ideas of Borges actually. Is this library actually endless? Can there be an endless amount of books? So they actually start yeah, discussing some of those ideas. So this is The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco from 1980. My next book has easily the most sinister librarian ever, and this is Haruki Murakami, The Strange Library from 1983, a very small, slim volume. You actually find a separate review of this on my channel, and yeah, it's a lovely book because it had lots of lovely artwork in it, so yeah. But also, as I say, probably the most sinister librarian ever. This plot of the story is very simple. A young boy, we're never really told how old our main character actually is, but he can mostly be a teenager, goes to his local library to bring back books and also to borrow a new book. And the librarian at the desk says to him, oh, that's a very specialized thing you're looking for. You have to go and see the subject librarian. Just go through that door over there and you'll find him. And the boy follows this direction and goes through the door. Yeah, and ends up in a library that is quite a labyrinth again, partly underground. And yeah, we find out pretty quickly that the librarian that's there to help the boy has quite his own agenda, and it's very sinister. So it's a mix of portal fantasy with horror elements, and yeah, definitely worth a look into, and can be read in an afternoon because it is super short. And yeah, you might want not to read it when you have planned a trip to the library, because as I say, librarians are not getting a good name in this one. My next example is actually a comic, and this is Neil Gaiman, The Sandman, especially this very first bind up of the first 8 volumes called Preludes and Nocturnes, and this is from 1988. In The Sandman we encounter Dream and his 6 siblings, who are originally from the realm of Morpheus the Dreaming. And in this realm we also encounter a library, and this library contains every book that can be imagined. So books that haven't been written yet, basically. And yeah, no, we get a bit of the Borges idea and Borges vibe here as well with Neil Gaiman, and this totally fictitious library with totally fictitious books. 1 year later, in 1989, we have the book that I think has one of the coolest librarians and is definitely one of my favorites from this list, and this is Terry Pratchett's Guards. So this is part of Discworld, and I think it's where L-Space is introduced. I'm not 100% sure, but I think so. If not, please correct me in the comments. So L-Space is again a portal. It's a library that's part of the University of Ankh-Morpork, and yeah, the idea behind this library is that books have power, that if we have enough books in one space, that they don't just have power but also have magical power and can open a portal. So L-Space is not just a library, but it's also a portal into another dimension. but also a portal that allows the librarian to travel in time. No, so L-space is, yeah, a spatial representation of what books do. Books are magic, books are portals into other worlds, books make us forget time, transport us into other times, and yeah, this is what L-space is all about. And yeah, it also has the coolest librarian ever, because the librarian here is a orangutan, and he only communicates with two sounds, ook and eek. And I swear to you, I think I've encountered that librarian in a university library somewhere. And yeah, I think he tried to masquerade as a human, but there was definitely something off. My next example is from 2001, and this is Carlos Ruiz Zafón, The Shadow of the Wind. Here we have a library of a little bit a different type. In this novel we encounter Daniel. Daniel yeah, wakes up one morning and he can't really remember his mother anymore, his mother's face anymore. And his father brings him to what's called the Cemetery of the Forgotten Books. And this book is actually the first in this series, the Cemetery of Forgotten Books series. I've only read the first, I haven't read the other three, so I can only tell you something about this one. As I say, so his father brings him to this Cemetery of Forgotten Books. And they're forgotten because they're discarded. People don't want them anymore. They might have thrown them away or just have them lying around, don't read them anymore. And the idea is that if you go to the Cemetery of Forgotten Books, that the books will find new readers and also then be loved again, read again, and also kind of like give meaning again and been giving meaning again. So this is very much a coming of age story on one level, but also again a story about the meaning of life, but also a story about how do we ascribe meaning to books and how do books then in return give meaning to us and to our lives. My next example is from 2004 and is easily my favorite German fantasy writer. And this is Walter Mörs und die Stadt der träumenden Bücher. This has been translated into the City of Dreaming Books. This is the first in what's planned as a trilogy. The last book unfortunately still hasn't come out, but I would still recommend this if you like Pratchett, and I think Mörs has probably been, yeah, mostly compared to Terry Pratchett in the way how he writes. All his books are set on a fictional continent called Sarmonien, so this one as well. And some of them, this in particular, have a main character called Hildegund von Mythenmetz. And Hildegund von Mythenmetz is a lindworm, which means he's a dragon. And he's a dragon with literary aspirations. He is a writer, translator. So a lot of Walter Mörs' books are also kind of posing as being translated from yeah, the languages of Sarmonien, and this is the case here as well. Yeah, and one day Hildegund has the problem that first he has writer's block, second he's overweight, third he's totally unfit, and yeah, one afternoon when he wallows in his misery and is having a cup of tea and some cookies, he chokes and he thinks he has having a heart attack. And this is kind of like his wake-up call, because he thinks, okay, something has to change, this can't go on forever. So he decides, I will go on a journey, and I will kind of like a hiking trip. I will walk to the city of Buchheim, which is the city of books, and he hopes for inspiration. He also hopes to find some cool mythical manuscripts. And yeah, he gets more than he has bargained for, because Buchheim is all about the book. Almost any shop in the city is a bookshop that kind of like, yeah, specializes in totally weird books. one might have just books about libraries, another one has just books that are only 2 inches tall, another one has books that are just from one specific material. There are of course also restaurants and pubs, so you can go to a pub and get a drink that makes you hallucinate, and you hallucinate that you are a book. But also underneath of the city are the catacombs, and in the catacombs we have the really dangerous books. Books that actually can cost you your life. And yeah, so Hildegun von Metz, of course, explores the city, and not just the city, but also the catacombs. Next one is from 2015, Genevieve Cockman, The Invisible Library. This is the first in a series that has 6 or 7 volumes out by now, so it's still ongoing. And the idea here is that we have an invisible library that exists between worlds, and the library is tasked with keeping the balance between worlds, especially the balance between the world of the Fae, which are very chaos driven, and the world of the dragons, which is Asian inspired, but also very orderly and almost over regimented. And so ideally, of course, one wants a balance between those 2 extremes, and this is what the task of this library is. And to achieve this, the library collects books from every world imaginable. And yeah, we meet Irene, a young librarian in training, and of course her big wish is to become a librarian in one of those worlds that she then looks after. And yeah, we kind of follow her. We also kind of get more and more info about her backstory. So again, it's not just about books, but it's also about kind of yeah, identity and who somebody might be. My next book is from 2019, and this is Erin Morgenstern's The Starless Sea. Here we have Zachary, a grad student who goes to his New England University library, and he finds a book in the stacks that is quite disconcerting to him, because amongst other kind of like folk tales and stories, he finds also events from his childhood described in this book. And yes, of course, he has to go on a mission to find out why is this, what's going on with this book. So it's a quest story. It's again a story kind of like about identity. It's a story about meaning. And yeah, we encounter not just this university library, but the book also contains clues to another very ancient library that allegedly then also contains all the knowledge of the universe, which brings us then also back again to this idea of Borges, of a library that contains all the knowledge that we can imagine. And my last book for this roundup is from an author where I said I definitely will not be a fan, and this is Sarah J. Maas, the first of the Crescent City novels, House of Earth and Blood. Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of this book, but I have to give to Sarah J. Maas that her world building is very, very spot on and solid. And she also has a library in this book, and this was really one of the highlights for me when I was reading this, because our heroine Bryce, she works as, let's say, a glorified sales assistant in a gallery, and this gallery has in its basement a library. And with the gallery it sells mythical and magical artifacts, and it's not always quite sure what the provenance of those artifacts is, where exactly do they come from, and also kind of like, have they been legally acquired? Is it legal actually to own them? And this is the same question with the books in the basement. The door to the gallery, and especially the door to the basement library, are secured by special spells. And this is not just to keep people out of the library, but also to keep the books in the library, because like with lots of magical libraries, the books are partly alive, the books can be dangerous, and therefore this library also has a very, very cool guardian to keep the books on the shelves, basically. The gallery and also the library, the gallery has kind of like lots of little tanks like terrariums, and the gallery owner is a very powerful sorceress, and she constantly threatens people, kind of like, if you do not do what I tell you, I turn you into a toad or into whatever critter. And so there are those terrariums dotted around the gallery with, yeah, slightly dubious animals in them. And the question, of course, is, did she really do that? Are those kind of like, have those been humans before? And it's the same with the library. The library has this gigantic aquarium in it. And yeah, now one of the questions, of course, is what's lurking in there. So yeah, it's definitely a very glitzy space, but it's also, yeah, it has its sinister undertones and it's very well realized. And yeah, this concludes my roundup of spaces with libraries. I hope that there was something for you in this roundup, something you might want to read or reread. As always, give me your recommendations, things I haven't mentioned yet, in the comments. And yeah, happy reading and all the best.